I'm Brooke,
And this is Michael.
and we're here today to talk about our oversight of the actions the county's Wastewater Treatment Division has taken in response to recommendations made by AECom following the significant flooding event that occurred at the West Point treatment plant in February 2017. Several system failures at West Point during heavy rainfall on February 9, 2017, led to a significant flooding incident at the facility, which caused an estimated 244 million gallons of untreated or partially treated sewage to be discharged into Puget Sound. The flood also left behind $23 million in damage to the facility and brought to light many shortcomings in the treatment plant, its systems, and WTD's life safety management, staffing, and training. On this slide, we show a timeline of events related to incident response and oversight following the flooding event. You don't need to read all of these words. The key points are that AECom and Ecology both made a series of recommendations to WTD following the incident, and the King County Council asked our office to provide oversight of WTD's implementation of those recommendations. Our office's independent oversight provides an unbiased view of what work WTD has completed, where risk remains, and whether WTD is taking sufficient steps to mitigate those risks until it can fully implement some capital-intensive solutions. Overall, it's our assessment that out of 98 total recommendations, which you can see on the right-hand part of the slide, WTD has completed implementation of 63 out of the 98 AECom recommendations and made progress toward implementing 26. We broke our oversight into 4 areas of improvement for West Point, based on areas identified in AECom and Ecology's reports. You can see these 4 areas down the left-hand portion of the slide: capital improvements, life safety, evaluation and studies, and training and staffing. You can see the overall progress in each of these areas in the table on this slide, and Michael will go through each of these areas in greater detail in the coming slides. But first, I'd like to talk for a moment about risk. As you can see, in some of these areas, WTD has completed a majority of the recommendations. However, in some cases, the recommendations that remain to be implemented are the ones that will do the most to mitigate risk. For instance, based on AECom's recommendations, WTD has identified a number of large, long-term capital projects to improve capacity and redundancy at West Point beyond the $23 million I mentioned earlier. WTD plans to complete these projects by 2027, seen on the right of the slide. And as the large pink shaded area on the graphic shows, some risks will not be mitigated for many years. Risk at West Point will decrease over the next 7 years as WTD completes key capital improvements. Overall, the projects will total to more than $200 million in expenditures between now and 2027. As I mentioned previously, there were 4 major areas to our review. Our overall assessment of the remaining risk in each of these areas is: 1. Capital project work remaining is extensive and will extend over many years, and risks will remain until it is complete. 2. Life safety efforts will take more resources and time to fully implement. 3. Studies and evaluations related to West Point's capacity could lead to further required investments. And 4. WTD's training and staffing improvements to date have been excellent. I will now hand the presentation over to Michael, who will cover each of these topics and also explain the schedule and cost of remaining actions to complete risk mitigation.
Thank you, Brooke. I will first speak about the capital investments at West Point. WTD finished 75% of the capital improvement recommendations made by the AECom consultant. This work encompassed over $800,000 of immediate improvements at the plant, which added important redundancy, secondary power, or electrical circuits in case a primary system or unit of equipment fails. In addition, the Wastewater Treatment Division submitted a FEMA grant requesting $13.8 million to upgrade electrical switchgear to protect the treatment plant from unusual power surges. Larger capital improvements, as Brooke mentioned, will take nearly a decade to complete, as is reflected on this slide. Replacing raw sewage pumps is a major endeavor. This work is important because no pump redundancy exists when sewage flow hits peak processing capacity at the plant during storm events. This means during peak flow events today, all pumps must be in service at full capacity. The estimated cost of this work is $177 million and may take beyond 2027 to complete. The passive weir's importance is to provide the ability to use the emergency bypass system using gravity instead of the current configuration, which requires power and pumping. The cost of this work is $5 million, but the job is complex, needing several years to complete. The other two projects include power line monitors to evaluate the health of the power grid and a pump vibration system for monitoring the health of the effluent pumps. To put West Point's needs into perspective, the more than $200 million to be invested at West Point represents close to a full year of WTD's entire capital program spent across all of its assets. As such, some projects need to be delayed until future years to make West Point a higher priority. Two examples that the agency listed of projects that are going to be deferred is the North Beach Outfall Replacement Project and the North Lake Sammamish Flow Diversion work. I will next like to focus on life safety. WTD has made good progress, principally on protecting the personnel at the plant. The division hired a life safety coordinator. They drafted a life safety management plan with interim procedures now in place. The staff at West Point prioritized hundreds of alarms into the most vital indicators when flows at the plant begin to trend higher than equipment capacity. In addition, backup control indicators have been installed to improve redundancy and provide warning indicators at the plant. For the foreseeable future in the life safety work, WTD has allocated 5 years to finish over $10 million in capital improvements. As indicated on this slide, the scope of the work predominantly includes adding permanent backup instrumentation and controls in case primary instrumentation controls and related indicators fail. Focusing now on key studies and engineering evaluations, two major engineering evaluations are underway. First, the Clean Water Plan addresses the entire King County treatment and collection system. An aspect of this plan is to determine any alternatives WTD needs to consider to manage flows to West Point differently. One option, for example, may be to divert flows elsewhere in the system. The flow and load study forecasts challenges the plant will have in the future to process both liquid and solids volumes. The cost of this work for all three King County treatment plants is $1.1 million and should wrap up in October. WTD has already completed two studies, the pre-design analysis for the raw sewage pump work and the passive weir project. In the case of training and staffing, WTD completed 100% of the requirements for ecology and nearly 97% of AECOM recommendations. The division engaged the entire cross-functional team at West Point to discuss and document improved standard operating procedures in light of several emergency scenarios practiced that were similar to the incident from February 2017. Moreover, WTD instituted a hydraulic simulation model of the plant for practice, training, and certification of its operators. And now electricians and maintenance personnel are on recall or standby when heavy rains are predicted, as well as on nights and weekends. To address these risks, we have made 4 recommendations from our oversight work. Number 1, WTD should seek early approval from the Department of Ecology to reduce risk of delay to starting major capital projects. Second, the division should formalize life safety management beyond current interim measures to ensure hazard analysis challenges and related decisions are thoroughly documented. Third, WTD should seek opportunities to truncate or divert flows at West Point to reduce the risk the plant could be overwhelmed in the future. And finally, we recommend a more formal and expanded training program to reinforce the lessons and provide increased continuity during staff turnover. In conclusion, capital work represents the greatest challenge to risk reduction at West Point. Life safety requires another 5 years and $10 million of investments. 2 studies underway could lead to further peak flow mitigation requirements. And WTD's training and staffing improvements have been excellent. We will continue to monitor these open recommendations. Our report is available online. We would like to thank Stan Hummel, Bruce Kessler of WTD and their team for their time and cooperation. Thank you very much.